Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and this week, as with every week, I'm delighted to have you with me for the next hour or so, whether you're watching the show live when it goes on Facebook and X and YouTube, Thursdays, 9 p.m. Central, or perhaps you're watching the show archived on one of those sites after that date, or listening to it, where we go out every Friday now on every audio podcast platform out there, just about, the audio-only version, of course. So welcome. Thank you for being with me. I hope you are getting ready for Halloween. It's getting very fally up here in the Northwoods. The days are noticeably shorter now. It's crazy. I'm starting to take the last of my pumpkins off soon. I've got some off. There'll be more coming down off my vines in my pumpkin patch. I think everything else is out of the garden. We're hearing all kinds of spooky sounds at night. We have to run in before it gets too dark when my daughter and I are outside playing or wandering around our wooded property, because as soon as she hears any owl noises, she loves going out watching the migrating birds, but at the moment she's creeped out by the owls, because some of them, like she says, sounds like monkeys, and I think she's concerned it's actually Sasquatch. But there's been, whatever they are, there's been an awful lot of them in this neck of the woods at this time of the year, which is spooky, so it's wonderfully appropriate as well. Speaking of wonderfully appropriate, we continue this month's spooky episodes with tonight's amazing guest. He was born and raised in the Cascade Mountains, and he hails from a family of storytellers, artists, and musicians. He and his wife, Laura, have spent years collecting folktales and legends of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. He is a tour guide, wood carver, writer, musician, visual artist, historian, and public speaker. He and his wife host storytelling gatherings as well as paranormal research and walking tours of historical locations. And they were instrumental in my feature documentary, which I'm still making, and they still are instrumental in it. But when I went to Maury Island, I was fortunate enough to have them as my tour guides there. And as a result of all the research, investigations, and storytelling they do and speaking to people, they've written and published a book back in 2019 known as The Odd Man Up, which presents a deep dive into North American mythology. They've recently finished, I believe, a second book of regional folk tales entitled By Candlelight, Stories for the Dark, or that was at least the working title. And I think that's scheduled to be released pretty soon. So I'm looking super forward to reading that one. And having listened to countless family tales regarding UFOs, Bigfoot, strange supernatural beings, ghost towns, logging camps, railroaders, and bootleggers, our guest tonight brings authentic first-hand and oral histories for all ages and diverse audiences. So I'm delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my very good friend, the one and only Mr. Bob Antone. Welcome, Bob.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing?
Man, I'm so glad to have you here. You're such a perfect guest for a show at this time of the year.
I've got the Unsolved Mysteries t-shirt on. I'm sporting a Bob's Big Boy hat. We just got back from Los Angeles and went to Bob's Big Boy, where David Lynch used to hang out, and he wrote ideas for Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks at that diner, historic location. This is one of my influences. Our influences is the Unsolved Mysteries TV show. Obviously, many of you are familiar. You get bonus points if you can figure out what this comes from, which episode. We can't figure it out. We've been trying to figure out, what is this scene? What episode is this from? So if anybody out there is a connoisseur of Unsolved Mysteries, please comment, let us know. We'll send you a gift. We'll send you something in the mail.
Let me make you go full screen so the audience can see.
Oh, okay. And I'll get up real close. It's kind of a glare, but there you go.
That's very cool. Super cool. Speaking of super cool, I can't wait to hear some of your stories tonight. But tell me, what else have you been up to lately? I know since you were last on that you released another album, which will be in the show notes. The one you recorded, the live album.
Yeah. So in January of this year, we recorded live at the Sunset Garage in downtown North Bend, and that happens to be the place where the jail scenes were filmed in Twin Peaks, and it was a few days after David Lynch died. So our band has been performing around since then. So, but coming up on Halloween, I am doing a fundraiser for the local museum, the Snoqualmie Valley Historical Museum, and I'm going to do a night of storytelling. The first showing is for kids, family friendly, and that starts at 5:00. And that's in Snoqualmie. And the second showing is at 7, and it's for adults only. So all of the really creepy and true crime and severed body parts and severed heads and everything else, we'll be discussing that at a later show. But we're going to raise money for the Snoqualmie Valley Museum. Then on November 2nd, which is Sunday, we're going to go to the town of Matlock. And Matlock is in the Olympic Peninsula, and it actually is connected to one of the stories we're going to be discussing this evening about the legend of John Turnow. Now, John Turnow was an outlaw, and he would be an early serial killer of the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to go into that in a little bit. So that's what we've been up to. We're just researching, collecting information, and getting ready. I really enjoy offering stories, especially for fundraisers and for community organizations. The Matlock event is also a fundraiser for their Grange Hall. The Grange Hall is their meeting place, a central hub in the community, and it has structural issues. They want to upgrade the kitchen. So we're going to raise money there on November 2nd. Community members are going to come together and try to put together and pool money, a stone soup social. So that's what's going on lately.
Well, I would encourage anybody to get out to anything that you're at, because you're always such incredible company, and you always do so many interesting things, and you're always so super busy as well, which I always admire in people who have so many fires, or so many irons rather in the fire, and so many fires as well, perhaps starting everywhere. And I'm excited. I don't know very much about, is it John Turno? Is that the one of the stories you'll be, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yes, John Turno. Yeah. So how is my audio? Is my audio okay now? Am I loud or is it good?
I think it's okay. I can't fiddle anymore because it's on auto anyway on your
Okay.
side, I think. So StreamYard won't let me play with it. I think you'll be fine.
So I'm just talking a little softer than I normally would. I hope that helps.
I think so.
Okay. All right. So I'm coming in loud and clear. So here is the interesting thing about John Turnow. So as you well know, this channel is very squatchy. A lot of folks out there understand the history of J.W. Burns in BC, Canada, who began to write about Sasquatch in the 1920s, 1930s. And that word Sasquatch is based on the original word Saskets, Halkomelem, that's the tribe, and the word is Saskets. It's interesting that they got Sasquatch out of Saskets. It seems easier to pronounce Saskets. So anyway, there was all of this journalism going on, this crazy up over the top writing about wild hairy men in the woods. And what's strange is 10 years prior to that, we had the legend of John Turnow. And this is in Washington State. So I'm going to connect the two here in a bit. So let's just start out at the beginning. So the legend of John Turnow begins with his birth on September 4th, 1880. He was born near the town of Elma. My Aunt Lynn was also from that town. Her family is from the town of Elma. So if you're thinking of Kurt Cobain and Aberdeen and Hoquiam, that's that neck of the woods, Gray's Harbor, on the way out to the Puget Sound and the ocean, Gray's Harbor. And so he was born in 1880, and a logging family. They were involved in logging. About 10 years old, John got the black measles. And so he was disfigured. He developed a lisp, and he started to withdraw from society. He spent a lot of time by himself in the woods, and he would go by himself and just stay by himself, and he didn't want to see people at all. He felt self-conscious. And at some point, he got a job as a logger when he was 13 years old. Believe it or not, people started working in the woods as young as 12 and 13. He worked for a company for a while, and then suddenly his father passed away, and it was a shock to the family. He came back home, and then right around that same time, his mother fell and broke her hip. And so he was grieving. He already had this issue with his face and the way he felt about himself and his lisp. And so then his mother was being taken care of by a relative, a close relative, a young woman. And then suddenly she became pregnant, and it was a mystery. Who got her pregnant, right? She carried the baby a long way, and then suddenly was rushed to the hospital and gave birth, and it was a stillborn. And then she promptly died during the childbirth. And the interesting part of it is that the doctor was arrested on suspicion of murder. And that's a whole nother story. But you can see all these things are stacking up. And John Turnow is just totally bombarded with all this grief and loss and sorrow. And then his mother passes away. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So upon her passing, the will came out, and all of the siblings found out that John inherited all 400 acres of land. She willed all 400 acres of land to John, and that angered the brothers. And so this escalated over the years, and they were very angry that he inherited the 400 acres. And one day they got into a big argument, and John's brother shot John's dog. And so John turned around and got a gun and then went after his brother's dog and shot his dog. And then he said point blank, he said, "I am going to be leaving now. I'm going out in the woods. You're never going to see me again. I don't want to be living in society at all. I'm out of here." So he went out in the woods. Now these brothers, these siblings, they wanted to have this land. You see, they really, really hungered. They wanted to somehow get around the will. So in order to do that, they had to prove that maybe their brother was insane And that's exactly what they did. They went to the sheriff's office. They reported him a vagrant, that he was mentally unstable. They went out and somehow they kidnapped him, or they basically against his will took him to a mental institution in Portland, Oregon. And so 2 weeks later, John escaped. Okay. John escaped, went back to the woods. This guy was an excellent woodsman. He knew how to survive. He could do anything. He could, he was very, very skilled. So he had a sister named Minnie. He loved his sister Minnie. He would visit her often. And Minnie had 2 twin boys. And the 2 twin boys were his little buddies. And he would teach his nephews everything he knew about trapping, hunting, everything. Taught them how to survive in the woods. So the 2 twin boys, they went out looking for their uncle. They were hunting, and they came across a bear that was eating a carcass, and they opened fire on this bear. And the story goes, they didn't know that their uncle's camp was right up beyond that. So Uncle John had taken a steer, and for survival, for meat, he had started to butcher his sister's steer, and they didn't know that his camp was up that direction. So when they started shooting at this bear, John heard this gunfire coming at him, and so he returned fire. And the story goes that he killed both of his nephews, shot them through the heart. And this is where the manhunt began. And it lasted 1 year and 7 months. So the nephews were found dead. Everybody knew that he loved his nephews. So it was either a setup. They were trying to make him look bad because they wanted this 400 acres of land, or it was an accident because everybody knew that he loved his nephews. And so for 1 year and 7 months, they had parties of dogs and posses of 200 men going through the woods. This is north of Aberdeen, north of Hoquiam. This is up in the woods. It's called the Wenatchee River Valley. And so he was hiding out. He used frogs as an alarm system. So he knew that when people would come near, frogs that are croaking, this is a wetland, this is like a rainforest, right? So frogs would stop croaking. So he could sense that people were coming up the path. And so he could hide. He had all these ways of hiding. They couldn't find this guy. They couldn't find him. So in March of 1912, 2 Chehalis County Sheriff's deputies, Colin McKenzie and A.V. Elmer, they went on the hunt for turnow near the town of Matlock. Now, this is the town that I'm going to be performing at in November 2nd. And they were never heard from again. They just disappeared and they vanished into the woods. And so 2 weeks later, they found their bodies, and they were just under the earth, but they were buried in a T. So their bodies, I guess, spelled the word or the letter T for turnow. And so, man, they were just furious. People were furious. So at this time, everybody all over the area, they had this legend that was growing of this wild man, and he was the devil. He was possessed by a demon. He was half human, half beast. They called him the man beast and the timber beast. So they literally thought that this guy was possessed by a demonic spirit, that he was part creature. He could be a skinwalker. He could be a Wendigo type thing. And so this guy was walking around, and people, every time someone went missing, they thought, oh, John got him. Kids would look out in the woods and they'd see some kind of figure, and they thought, oh, they had a sighting. They'd see, and they were scared. Everybody was petrified. They were so afraid of this guy, and it was in all the newspapers. So it made all the newspapers, internationally, this manhunt for John Turnow, that people were so scared. It shut down logging operations. So Simpson Logging, they were very active at that time around Matlock and Shelton and up into the peninsula there. The folks, the settlers there, the workers, the loggers, they were leaving. They were eager to get out of the area because they were all afraid of this guy. And kids would come right home from school. They would stay inside. They'd shut themselves in. This guy was a beast, and the legend just kept growing and growing, this wild man. And so finally it came to a culmination in April of 1913. And there was a shootout. So if you go 29 miles up the Winoche River. There's a place up there, and they found his camp finally in April of 1913. And so there were several law enforcement that were shot in that incident, and he killed John Quimby, who was one of the law officers then. And then Sheriff Matthews, the next morning, was first on the scene. They found the bodies. They had retreated the night before after this big shootout. It was just this massive shootout. And they retreated, and then they came back the next morning. And sure enough, they found John. There he was. And so everybody was like, finally, this is over. So they got the body of John, and they packed it from this remote camp. And they took his body along the river, the Winoche River. And along the way, everybody wanted to take a picture with this legendary man beast. There he is. And there's two gentlemen standing and posing with him. Everybody wanted a photograph. They came down, and then finally they got to Montesano. Montesano is really close to Aberdeen. It's really close to Hoquiam. That's all Kurt Cobain's, Nirvana. Kurt Cobain, that's where he was from. And they finally got to Montesano, and believe it or not, 1,500 or more people showed up. Men, women, children. These were settler families, and they just wanted to see this creature, this man beast. And so they all came in, and they took pieces of his clothing. They cut off pieces of his hair. Everybody took a keepsake. It was this amazing thing. So this whole cultural phenomenon of John Turneau, the devil of the Winoche River Valley, that was it culminated in 1913. So if you think about it, if you were a journalist up in Canada and you wanted to one-up this story, because J.W. Burns, he was obviously aware of this story. He's very close. He was in British Columbia. So he would have absolutely pushed, his story even further, because they wanted to sell newspapers. A lot of time back then, newspapers were part of the entertainment. This is before, silent film and that kind of thing. And a lot like Pulp Fiction, you talk about Ray Palmer and, expounding upon these fantastic stories. So just imagine you're trying to one-up John Turneau. So you've got this, I've got this story about Sasquatch, these wild men. And so yellow journalism, people were exaggerating and just taking it so far. They're talking about wild men that lived in another dimension, and they had little bits and pieces. So for you folks out there who don't necessarily believe in Sasquatch, but you're more of like a scientific approach where you're skeptical and you want to follow that trail, this is kind of an out for you. I mean, you could follow the trail of yellow journalism. And I believe, this is one of my theories, is that the legend of John Turneau sort of spurred some of the later Sasquatch legends, because it's not that far away. It's just a few 100 miles north. That's where the reporting came in the 1920s and 30s. And J.W. Burns absolutely would have known about this case. This took the whole country by storm. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's fascinating. I didn't know anything about the story until you sent me some materials before the show, but that parallel that you draw with the area already being so conscious of wild men at the dawn of, the, I suppose, anglicization of Sasquatch stories. There's a book in that. I hope you and Laura think about writing it.
Yeah. If someone out there has written a book like that or put those two things together, that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear that. So,
no, but you guys should do it. If not, I mean, it should be in. I don't know if there's any room left in your next book or not that's coming out. Maybe there could be a chapter just about the tying in that to the Sasquatch legend.
It's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. So I've got the title of this segment is Horrific Mysteries, and so that was the first horrific mystery. I guess you could say that's our first really well-documented serial killer of Washington State. There's probably other ones before that, but that's a really famous one and a very early one. So I've got a couple other stories that are horrific, and one of them has a song, and I think I'm going to perform that song if that's okay with you
Oh, I would
at
love you
some
to.
point. Okay, all right. So I'm going to just jump into it. If anybody has any questions, I might pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions.
I'll keep an eye on it as well in the in the chat. People were commenting. Obviously, some people were obviously shocked by it. I mean, it's a heck of a
Oh,
story that nobody's heard about. Some people felt sorry for John Turner. I mean, and I think I read in one of the things you sent me. You told me the part of the frog story, and I'll just say this while we're waiting in case anybody does have any questions. But you said he used the frogs as the alarm system, but apparently he was living on frog meat as well. Or one of the theories went frog and elk meat.
yes.
I read.
Yeah, so they call frogs out here the crab of the woods. So they call, it's very common for people to eat frogs, and it's like crab meat, I guess. I've had it before. It does taste similar, but it was a common food for folks living on the peninsula and throughout the Puget Sound.
Oh.
Yeah, and the next story I'm going to tell you, this is I've told this story before, but I've never performed the song. So
Fantastic.
here goes. So it was 1999. By the way, is my voice, it's still pretty good. I'm just keeping it low.
No, you're
I
good.
hope it's not distorted or anything. It's not
No,
distorted.
it's good.
Okay, good. Because I know the mic was pretty hot when we started. So, okay. All right. So back in 1999, my Uncle Joe Rohrback, he and I were working. I used to frame houses. That's what I used to do in my 20s. I used to frame houses, and I was a carpenter. I was on framing crews, and I'd work with my uncles. And so my Uncle Joe Rohrback and I had worked a full day, and he went home, and he came to his little rental cabin located at Echo Lake, which is the junction of Interstate 90 and Highway 18. And so he came to the back sliding glass door of his cabin, and he looked down in the dog dish. And what did he see? He saw a hand, and he thought, oh, yeah, my son's playing a trick on me. And so he went, oh, I'm so scared. And he picked up the hand, and he brought it up to his face. And then he realized he could smell rotting flesh. So he realized this was a real severed hand. He dropped the hand on the floor. He kind of threw up on himself. He ran over to the phone and he dialed 911, and he called law enforcement. They called the FBI. Now, the FBI brought in the Green River Task Force. So the Green River Task Force was responsible for investigating all of the Green River killings. So they were trying to investigate to see, is this severed hand something in line with the Green River killer? And they not only did they find one body, a female from Tacoma that had been dismembered and discarded, but they found more than one victim. They found several bodies in the woods right behind my Uncle Joe's house where he was renting. So the detective gave my uncle a card, and he says, keep your eyes open. And if you see anything suspicious, I want you to call me right away. So Joe, thank you, took the card. And then about a month later, he came home from work, and there was a van, this creepy van that was parked in this one gravel parking lot. And he suddenly realized that he had seen that van a lot. That van had been there quite a bit. And then around the time that he found the severed hand, his dog Mongo, by the way, Mongo, that's the name of the dog that drug the hand out of the woods. I got to give Mongo credit because that's who actually found the hand. Anyway, he realized at the time that Mongo, the dog, found the hand and drug it out of the woods, this van was nowhere to be seen. It was gone. And it was gone for a month afterwards. And so he's like, oh my God, there's got to be something. He got a gut feeling. He's like, there's got to be something to this, right? So he called the detective, the card that he had been given. And sure enough, the law enforcement came in. They surrounded this van. They had probable cause to inspect the vehicle. And what do you know? They found evidence. And this is one of the early DNA cases because this was 1999. DNA evidence was just right there on the cusp. That was right when they were using DNA. And so they actually tied and they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that these two men that were in this van were the perpetrators. They were able to prove that they had killed not only this one woman who my uncle found her severed hand, but several victims, all of them from the Tacoma area. I don't know what it is about Tacoma, but Tacoma has a history of serial killers. Now, the interesting thing about this, before I play the song, so stay tuned. I'm going to perform this song. I got to go get my guitar. But the Hillside Stranglers, you may have heard of the Hillside Stranglers. Now, the Hillside Stranglers were also from Tacoma, or so I've been told. They moved down to Los Angeles, and they had a van. This was in the late 70s, right? And they would impersonate police officers, and the Hillside Stranglers were also from Tacoma. So here's 20 years later, and there's two gentlemen in a van. It's like, the mystery is, were they trying to be, was it a copycat? Were they trying to be like the Hillside Stranglers? Was it a repeat thing? I don't know. I would like to know more about it, but all of the information I shared with you has been validated, through my uncle and his experience. And I've looked up online. I know the event happened, and I know it was solved. So just give me a second, Dean. I've got to run and get my guitar.
Of course.
And I'll be right back. Okay.
I always love having Bob on because he has so many absolutely fascinating stories to tell. Tacoma, of course, was a big part of the origin of flying saucers, with the Maury Island incident happening just off the coast there between Tacoma and the island, Maury Island in the Puget Sound. And Fred Chrisman, the man of mystery, was, of course, from Tacoma. But I will let Bob now play you his.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I want to know if this sounds, can you hear this okay? It's not too loud, huh? Okay, here we go. In the woods they found a hand by man. The man that found the hand, his name was Joe. His dog brought it home and put it in a bowl. To find a body, you don't have far to go. Yeah, the FBI, they came, and policemen and some dogs. They sniffed around the woods into the night. The very next day, they found it where it lay. It must have been a pretty ugly sight. It's a sick world when you're an ugly girl. When you're a pretty girl, it must be worse. Was it a hatchet? Maybe a knife or two. Maybe a nail gun that finished you. His dog brought it home and put it in a bowl. To find a body, you don't have far to go. This is where the flesh flute solo comes in, right? Or the butt trumpet, sorry. Here we go, guys. You ready? If you're a pervert and you got bloody rags stuffed in the back of your El Camino, then I will ram you, run you right off the road. I will cut off your yellow wiener. I will cut it off. His dog brought it home and put it in a bowl. To find a body, you don't have far to go. Yeah! Let's Freedom Rock, turn it up, man. Sorry.
Amazing, man. I think a lot of people in the chat were enjoying it as well. There's not many podcasts in the paranormal space where you're going to get a talent like you actually playing an original song. So,
oh, thank you.
No, that's amazing. I'm always staggered with not only your ability as like a paranormal researcher and a storyteller, but your musical ability. Like you play about a dozen instruments or something, right? Like you play a bunch.
Yeah,
and you knock out, fun. And you knock out all these incredible songs, including music, which you've kindly letting me use which is just incredible in The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. But all of your music is great. I think there's a link in the show notes where on Bandcamp people can buy your most recent live album, but I'm pretty sure if they go there, then they can click through to Tinkham Road, your band, and I can see a
Yeah.
T-shirt and behind you on the left there. I have that Tinkham Road T-shirt myself, which I bought from you. I love
Oh, you do? Cool.
Tinkham Road
That's
is
great.
great. Such a
Thank
great
you.
band.
Thank
So
you.
I encourage people to hunt out, and they can hear some of the songs on YouTube, but go and support Bob. Buy some of buy a Tinkham Road album on Bandcamp. You won't regret it. My daughter and I listen to it all the time. Like we've got one in the truck. It's always on we've got one old-fashioned trucks. We've got a CD spindle with like 6 different
Oh, okay.
CDs in it. So we've always got a Tinkham Road in there. We always play it when we're driving along.
Thank you.
Great story
Very
too.
nice of you.
Bob.
So my favorite part of the song is when I do the nail gun sound. So that's kind of fun. So anyway, here's a little quick unsolved mystery. It's not so grisly or anything, but yeah. So when I used to frame houses a long time ago, I was framing a garage area, and I remember at the time I was using a nail gun, and I was overheating. I was so hot, and I was just sweating and sweating. But for some reason, I heard this voice, and it said, "Put your jacket on." I was like, "Put my jacket on? What? Why would I do that? Why would I want to put my jacket on, right? I'm super hot. I'm sweating." So I went over and I grabbed a wool Filson jacket and I put it on and I just listened to that voice. And I got back up in the rafters and here I was shooting the nail gun. And then at one point I lost my balance, right? I lost my balance and that nail gun went like this. And if I wasn't wearing
Gosh,
that wool jacket, I would have basically just cut my jugular. I would have bled out and just died. And so the punchline of the story is that wool Filson jacket used to belong to my mom's dad. So it's my grandfather's jacket. So kind of cool. I like the idea of guardian angels, especially family members who come and save you from death or harm. That's a nice subject to talk about.
well,
And I've got a couple more stories like that too. So happy thoughts or questions? Yeah.
I'm happy to just people commenting like Flat Rockland, who's been a guest on the show before. Matt Auckland was saying how he hoping to catch up with a gig of yours in North Bend sometime because he lives in your part of the world as well. But it's such an appropriate time of the year to talk about the spirits of the deceased and spirits of our loved ones, because of course that's part of the Halloween tradition, is the idea that
Yes.
as the veil goes down, the dead look in,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd like to jump around a little bit. I'll continue on that course. So I was talking about my mom's dad and how, his jacket saved me from a nail in my neck. So now I'm going to talk about something that she was involved in. So in about 1990, at that time in this town, we left our doors unlocked. We never locked doors or anything. And people just would leave their doors unlocked all day long. Nobody ever got robbed, right? Nobody cared. And so my mom came home. She had to get ready for an event. She had to change her clothes. And she went upstairs to the bedroom and she stopped right in the bedroom door. And she had a feeling, I'm not going to go inside the bedroom, and everything looked normal. It was quiet, but she just had this gut feeling like, yeah, I'm going to change later. And there'd be no reason why she wouldn't change right then, because she had to go to an event. So she turned around, walked back down the stairs, got in her car. She drove around for like 10 minutes, then came back again. And she was kind of feeling something strange and she didn't see anything, right? And then about an hour later, she went into this event. And then about an hour later, she came back and the house had been completely ransacked and robbed. And so everything was knocked over. You could tell that they had stolen everything they could. Things were knocked over and dressers were, just totally everything was in a disarray. So when the investigators went upstairs, they went into my parents' bedroom. And in the closet, there was this rolled up shirt. And it was like someone was in the closet. And if she would have walked in, they would have just strangled her to death. But something told her not to go into the bedroom that day. And she can't explain it, but there was just this warning and she could just feel it. But there was no visual cue. There was no other warning. It's just a spiritual feeling. So I always thought about that. If my mom walked through the door, I may not have my mom today. So that's another interesting story.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. Like, do we pick up on those things somehow subconsciously? Do we have some type of, I don't know, an extrasensory perception, perhaps, where we're aware that there's, something wrong, and maybe that's what the gut instinct is, or perhaps, as the case clearly seems to be when you put that jacket on, there seemed to be some actual message genuinely
Mhm.
from beyond warning us, or warning you in that case.
Yeah, oftentimes you hear about quantum physics and you hear about a particle that's way, thousands of miles away, and it can be connected to and behaving the same way as a particle, like two different particles. Well, if we're related to somebody, we have their DNA, we're physically related. Maybe that could explain connections over long distances or the spirit world. I'm going to jump around to some unsolved mysteries that are kind of fun, and then I'm going to end with another kind of grisly, horrific mystery. But I just kind of want to have some fun with maybe some lighthearted mysteries.
Love it.
There's a place called Skookum Lake. Skookum Lake is in Washington State again. And there's a story that a woman named Sheila Faubus told me. Her and her father and sister went camping one summer in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And so, they went camping at Lake Skookum, and I guess things were going okay. And, but the girls weren't having a good time. It was kind of raining a little bit. They were complaining. They were younger. And so Dad said, okay, we'll pack up, we'll go home. And so they packed up everything, put it back in the car. And just as they were leaving, this whole family of little people came out of the woods. The two sisters saw them and the father. Now, the dad, Mr. Faubus, was a school teacher at Snoqualmie Middle School. And so he was a no-nonsense guy. I mean, he taught like science, and, he didn't make up stories. And so, of course, he saw these little people, and she described it as, 2 and 3 foot tall, wearing earth tone clothes, like primitive clothes. Some of them had sort of, pointed hats, kind of pointed hats. So kind of like a gnome, but a little different, and earth tones, that kind of thing. And there was a woman, a little tiny woman, the little people that came out, and she smiled at these two girls and the family, and she just waved at them. And the two sisters in the back of the car there, they waved back, and the dad saw the whole thing. So when they got back to Snoqualmie Middle School, of course, the word got around town, and so they were asking about, oh, I heard your daughter saw little people, and they were teasing her, giving her a hard time, and, they were relentless about it. But I really got to hand it to the father. He didn't back down, and he backed up his daughter. He said, yes, I did see those little people, and I'm not going to change my story. They actually were there. I saw them, and he verified it. And so I thought that was a really sweet thing that he did. He backed up his daughter in that story. So there you go. There's a nice mystery.
That's a great story. And anything involving the fair folk or the other crowd, or, little people, I'm fascinated to hear. It's a great story.
Here's one about Mel's Hole. I'm sure everybody is familiar with Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. And there's a famous phone call. And, the story is that there's a hole in the ground over in eastern Washington called Mel's Hole. And, I've heard this for years and years, and I'm sure a lot of your audience knows exactly what I'm talking about. So last summer, not 2025, but the summer of 2024, I played music with a rodeo rider named CJ Trailer. And we played a concert for the Ellensburg Rodeo Association. And so we were over in Ellensburg, and I played, country music and cowboy songs and stuff like that. I played my fiddle and all that. It was fun. It was great. But after the show, I got to talking to the Rodeo Association, and there was this one woman. I have her name. I wrote it down. I have her phone number. She happens to be a 5th generation farmer, ranching family from Kittitas, Washington. So she grew up, and her family has been there, 150 years, right at the base of Autumn Ridge. And I asked her point blank, I said, I just got to know, is Mel's Hole real? And she looked at me and she says, absolutely real. Yes. And I looked her in the eye, and I was waiting to see if she's like flinching or maybe playing with me or teasing me. Nothing. No, she was absolutely serious. And she is willing to follow up and actually talk, further about it. But she said she's been there, and she said the claims are true, and she knows exactly where it is. And I'm like, whoa. So I have her phone number. I don't know. I haven't yet gone out to that spot, and I would like to. You'd probably think by now I would have said, "Hey, can you take me to that spot?" But I guess we're so busy. That sounds pretty lame. I'm sorry about that.
Man, you have to get in touch with her and go out to Mills Hole, for goodness sakes.
Absolutely.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah. I love that too. I think it's great.
I remember from the old Art Bell days. I mean, I used to in the early days, I could only ever listen to it if I was visiting America. But then, of course, you would find them, when the net got bigger, you would find copied, episodes which people had shared on the internet. And the Mel's Hole story is one of the classic Art Bell shows, one of the classic stories,
Mhm. Maybe when you're out here again, let's take your lady friend. Let's go. We're going to go on a road trip. Let's go find Mel's Hole. I think that would be fantastic. Oh my God.
There's a short documentary in that, at least, maybe a feature, depending what we find.
Oh my God. Totally.
There is an incredible documentary I've seen recently. I don't normally talk about films that I won't say whether it's a submission to the festival or not, because they shouldn't, but an amazing documentary called The Hole, which isn't about Mel's Hole, but it's about this strange hole that was discovered on the side of Mount Shasta. And Mount Shasta, of course, is filled with all these ideas and the documentary goes in all kinds of weird and wonderful places. It just unravels. I mean, I love the film so very much. It's not out yet, so nobody can see it yet. It's on the festival circuit, but there's probably space for a Mel's Hole documentary, particularly if you can get me to the location.
Absolutely. Seriously, we love helping other writers and filmmakers. We're generous. And so absolutely, I'm not hoarding any of this information. So if anybody wants to know, and I will share the contact, I don't care. I'd give it to you first though. I'd give it to you.
No, don't share it with anybody. There might be at least a short documentary for us in the future. Keep it. Nobody contact Bob and ask him for this thing, because I'll be like, Bob, don't give this contact to anybody. We're going to Mel's Hole next summer. Anyway.
Nice.
Great story. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit more if you guys want. I mean, I don't know. If anybody has any questions, please shoot, because it's like you go to Sizzler and you get the sampler plate. You get a little bit of everything. That's how I like to do these shows. It's just fun.
I love it.
Okay, so we're going to go to Los Angeles, and we're going to go to Pershing Square. So the Cecil Hotel. It's a famous hotel where Richard Ramirez, the serial killer, he lived at the upper floors, and he was a serial killer in Los Angeles. And that's also the location of that young lady who she was seen on camera, and she was talking in the elevator, and it was like she was talking to these strange beings or somebody that wasn't there. Very odd. And then she was found later on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in a water tank, and that was a whole mystery of how she ended up naked in this water tank. Famous stories. Well, 2 blocks away from that, I think two or 3 blocks, a couple blocks away from the Cecil Hotel, is a place called the Pershing Square. Now, there is a famous ghost there, which is a Native American woman. And so folks in the area claim that every once in a while they'll see a Native American woman, and she's floating about 3 or 4 feet above the sidewalk, and she's just walking. So it turns out that historically there was a woman that used to wash her dishes, and she used to bathe in what was the first aqueduct. Before it was the LA River in its current state, there used to be something called the Zanja Madre, which means the mother ditch. And it was like the first effort of irrigation in Los Angeles. And it was an aqueduct, but she, against the law, I guess they arrested her, and, it was controversial. She would insist on washing her clothes and washing her dishes and taking a bath at that exact spot. And so the aqueduct used to be 3 or 4 feet above where the current sidewalk is. So that could explain why she's seen hovering in midair. But if you're ever down in Los Angeles, they do have a wonderful ghost tour, and that is part of the ghost tour. You just have to look up Los Angeles ghost tours. But I just love that story. Pershing Square.
Yeah, that's a great story.
The goat's still down in the hole. What does that mean?
I think Mel might have thrown a goat down.
Oh, the goat. Yeah.
I didn't take it off. I'm sorry. Sometimes I click things on and I forgot to take
That's
that off.
awesome. No, that's okay. Okay. So I want to do a little journey over to Ukraine, and we're going to talk about UFOs in Russia. Why not?
Fantastic.
Let's do it. All right. And we're also going to talk about film history. So I have heritage on my dad's side. My mom's side's Irish. I've talked about that before. But on my dad's side, we came from the Ukraine, which used to be Russia. Now there is a very, very famous silent film that was filmed in 1925. And Sergei Eisenstein, and it's called The Battleship Potemkin. And so amazing film. And in fact, Alfred Hitchcock, this is a little bit of trivia for those out there. Alfred Hitchcock, and you know the famous Psycho, the film Psycho, he was greatly influenced by some of the Soviet filmmakers. He went to school in Berlin, and one of the films that he saw was Battleship Potemkin. And if you look at that scene, you can look it up on YouTube, you can say the Potemkin steps scene. And I've actually been to those steps, and it's an example of montage. So like when you see in Psycho, the way that Alfred Hitchcock would cut different scenes and create different emotions, almost like surrealism, he was greatly influenced by this particular film. And what's awesome is when we went to Ukraine, I stood on those steps, and the Potemkin steps. And I watched it today a couple times, and I'm telling you, it's 100 years old, this film footage, but it's still very disturbing. It gives you the chills. You're like, wow. And you can see why folks were greatly influenced. Even though this was a film about the Russian Revolution, the actual story is a group of sailors. There was mutiny on the battleship Potemkin in 1905. These sailors were mutinous, and they revolted. And that was the beginning of the Russian Revolution. And the whole city of Odessa, everybody was rioting, and they were shooting everybody and massacring everybody at that time. That's the true story. But in the film, they portray a bunch of folks that are standing and peaceful and waving at ships. And suddenly the troops come in and just start opening fire. There's a famous scene with a baby carriage that's just rolling down the Potemkin steps. So when we went there in 2011, we went to Ukraine and visited Odessa. It was a heritage tour. We went to those steps. And I encourage anybody who's, a film connoisseur, who is a horror movie buff, and you're interested in maybe Alfred Hitchcock. And I think Twilight Zone was also influenced by this film, this silent film, Battleship Potemkin. So while we were in the Ukraine, our tour guide mentioned flying saucers, UFOs. And I thought, okay, I got to tell Dean and the audience about this. So apparently her mother, out in the countryside, she had this encounter. And you got to know that the area like north of Odessa, like 100 miles north, is so rural and so like isolated. It's like people had, electricity, but not very much, plumbing. They had outhouses. And it almost was reminiscent of, a village of 100 years ago, because each house had a cow of their own. And at the end of the day, each cow would come down the main driveway, or the main road in the middle of Christina. And they knew every little house. They knew where they belonged. They would go in their barn, and each cow had a little different bell, a different sounding bell. And we were there for the procession of cows, and it was so cool. So each house has a cow to provide them with milk and all that. Very rural. And so anyway, this woman, she was out there, and at night walking around in the middle of this pasture in this field. It looks a lot like Yakima over there. It looks a lot like Ellensburg. It's just fields and fields and fields, and so suddenly above her, this big spotlight, I guess, appeared, but it was silent, almost like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And there was an object above her, and it was this huge spotlight. And as she ran, this spotlight kind of followed her. This was in the 60s. This was in the 1960s. But there was no sound. It was silent. And then suddenly the light turned off, and she looked up and there was nothing above her, nothing above her. So just amazing. And so there's a lot of stories about UFOs seen around that area of Odessa in the countryside. And so you wonder, was that a UFO? But you could also think that maybe the Soviets were experimenting. Maybe they were developing crafts of different kind, and they were trying them out at night, that kind of thing. But there's a little UFO story from Russia/the Ukraine. Yep.
Wow, man, there's not many people that would be able to go from turn of the 19th, 20th century serial killers through personal ghost stories, through modern serial killers, to comparing Bigfoot to old serial killer stories, to LA ghost stories, to UFO Russian stories, to Eisenstein's theories about montage. So there you go.
Yes, I enjoy it. I enjoy it. And so, I do have, one more story. I can wrap it up within, looks like it's 7:58. I could probably do it within 4 minutes.
Take as long as you need to tell the story.
Okay. Now this is a little bit of dark comedy, and I encourage you guys to laugh, even though this is going to make you a little uncomfortable. It is dark comedy, and it's true, and it's crazy. And I'm just saving the best for last here. Here we go. Okay, so back in 2007, 2008, we used to have a vegetable and produce stand out in front of our house. And the farmers were Hmong, Hmong. Now, in the late 70s, a lot of Hmong refugees came from Laos and Thailand, and they moved to this area. There's also a community in Fresno, California. And I know in Wisconsin, Minnesota, there are Hmong communities. Well, we have one here as well. And we invited the farmers to set up in front of our house, and it was wonderful. And my kids were young, and we used to get, green beans and fresh fruit. And, we were part of the stand, and it was really fun. And we got to know the community and became part of that community. It was a wonderful experience. Well, the lady, I'm not going to use her name. I would call her a tradition bearer. You could say a medicine person within the Hmong community. She had very, 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 very special abilities. She had clairvoyant abilities. And so at certain times, a man named Ted would drive up, and he would want to buy some produce. And every single time that Ted drove up, she would pick up her chair and she would go back into the grass, and she would cross her arms like this. She just shake her head. She goes, "I won't help this guy at all." She's like, and she didn't say a word. She just shook her head. She was like 40, 50 feet away. So I ended up helping, make the transaction, took his money, weighed his fruit and his vegetables, and sent him on his way. Everybody loved Ted. Oh my gosh, he was the nicest guy. He was a substitute teacher for Snoqualmie Valley School District, and everybody knew him. He had a little Chihuahua, and the kids loved him. He would bring his little dogs into the classroom, and oh my God, everybody loved Ted. Ted, my mom, oh, Ted's wonderful. Oh, I love Ted. Oh my God. I finally asked my mom, I'm sorry, not my mom. I finally asked this woman, I said, "Why don't you want to serve Ted when he pulls up in his car?" And she says, "Well, I can see it in his eyes that he wants to hurt children. He wants to kill children." And I'm like, "What?" And I was like, "I don't believe you." I mean, I was shocked. And everybody in the community, like I said, they loved Ted. He was a part of our community. And so for her to adamantly say, "No, I saw it in his eyes. He wants to hurt children." I'm like, wow, man, oh man. It was a very strange moment. It stuck out in my head, for her to be so sure of that, right? So anyway, this is the expanded version of the story, by the way, because I've told this before, but there's more to it. And anyway, so 2 years go by, and we're sitting and watching the news, and suddenly this report comes on, and oh my gosh, there was Ted. And what did they find? They found child pornography on his computer. But Ted was more than that. He was writing poetry. He had these fantasies. And one of these, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I really don't want to make you throw up, okay? But I'm going to say There was a poem on his computer hard drive, and the title of that poem was Little Mop Head. And it was about a severed head. It was about a severed head of one of his students at school. And that student had curly red hair. And that's as far as I'm going to go. But it was fantasies with that severed head. And that's all I'm going to say. So I told that story at the Strange Storytelling Hour for the North Bend Film Festival. And there was a visiting comedian named Emmett. And Emmett Montgomery, is that his last name? Emmett. I just know his first name is Emmett. He's a visiting comedian, and he hosted the Strange Storytelling Hour. And I thought, there's people from Los Angeles here. There's people from New York City here. There's filmmakers from all over the world. They can handle this. Whatever. I can tell this story, no problem. And I talked about it with my wife the night before. She goes, yeah, I don't know. I'd be careful, So I was telling the story on the stage in front of a whole audience, right? And I got to the punchline about the severed head, and people started booing, and people started booing, and they were upset. They were so upset, right?
Oh my God.
And so the thing about it was the comedian, he was scheduled to come and stay the night at our house here, okay? And so we had an after party where we served spaghetti. And so Emmett came over. Long story short is in the living room, I had a carving set up, and it was a carving of a man's face with a big beard and bushy hair, a wild man kind of, right? Well, it just so happened, it looked exactly like this comedian. It was like I had done a sculpture of his head. I looked at it, and this was just a coincidence because I didn't even know this guy. But for some reason, the way I sculpted this face looked exactly like his head. And I go, well, I guess you're Big Mop Head then, huh? And so he was freaked out. He went in the room here, and I said, do you want me to tuck you in? He's like, no, that's okay. And I said, the last thing I said to Emmett was, good night, Big Mop Head. And I slowly shut the door. So here this comedian is shivering in our room, just freaked out. He thinks that I'm going to probably go in there and hold a knife to his throat or do something crazy. And it didn't help that our son had spray painted the wall, and it looked like a voodoo ritual inside the bedroom as well. So then 4 years later, I found out that he had told this story in Seattle as a stand-up routine and everybody in Seattle had heard the story of Little Mop Head and Big Mop Head. And this woman, she came up to me and she says, I can't believe you're real. I've heard this story for 4 years now, and I thought he made it all up, but you're actually a real person. I didn't know that this was all true. So my story and my horrible, horrific tale about a severed head, fantasies about a severed head, became comedic material for this comedian in Seattle. And that's the end.
Oh my God.
Thank you, guys. I guess that's all I got for you.
Again. Great job, Bob. That was fantastic. I knew that you would bring the scary, the creepy, the horrifying, and also the entertaining and the humorous to the table. What are you and Laura doing for Halloween before we let you go?
Oh yeah, for Halloween, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning. We're doing a storytelling performance at the Encompass, which is a children and family services agency. It's also called Children's Services, and it's a fundraiser for our Snoqualmie Valley Museum. So it's all going to be stories like I'm telling right now. The kids program is earlier, and then later is the adults only program. But it's a fundraiser for our beloved Snoqualmie Valley Museum. That's what we're doing.
That's fantastic. Do you guys have any personal traditions or anything you do for the Hallows period as well? Or
yeah, for the month of October, we usually watch at least 1 or 2 horror movies every day. So every day of October. And so I'm pretty well versed, and we're very well versed in horror. And we're film buffs. I mean, obviously. So it'd be fun to do a trivia night at some point with you about horror films, and see how much knowledge you and I we could go compete with each other.
You could maybe
spar with each other or something. I don't know.
That's a good idea. That is. And do you have a favorite or a couple favorite go-tos for like Halloween? Are there movies that you got to watch every year, or is there a movie you've got to watch every year?
I like Event Horizon. Event Horizon's very disturbing, very disturbing.
Yeah.
And then the actor that plays in that, he plays a grown-up Damien, in that. And it's just, man, he plays a creepy guy. I like that. I like Event Horizon.
He's also in John Carpenter's Mouth of Madness. Sam Neill. He's one of the great, and he's in Jurassic Park as well. He's the Dr. Alan Grant, Sam Neill, a New Zealand actor from my part of the world. Incredible talent.
Yeah.
Incredible
So
talent.
cool.
My original part of the world, I should say. Yeah, he's an incredible actor. Also in a movie, what's that other the lesser known horror movie? And it's the European one. He's in a film called Possession as well, which is one of my favorite horror movies. Just
I've never seen that one.
Yeah, it's more obscure. It's spectacular. Spectacular.
Sweet.
Very experimental horror, but great.
I like A24. I think they're from Australia. There's a company called A24, and there's Bring Her Back and Talk to Me. Those are fantastic films as of late. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they might be a European company, but I do know who they might. You know what? I don't even know. I don't think it doesn't mean A24 doesn't have some Australian funding or Australian attachment, but I thought they were European. They might even be American. I should know. I'm showing my ignorance that I don't.
No, that's all right.
I absolutely know who A24 are, though. Where are they based? I'm going to Google as soon as the show's finished because I should know.
I think Bring Her Back is an Australian
you're
film.
right.
They're brothers. I think they're Australian.
Bring Her Back is an Australian film, but I think the actual the mini studio, the distribution company, whatever it is, I don't think they're Australian based. It doesn't mean they don't acquire Australian cinema. They do a lot of great stuff.
Cool, yeah. But anything A24 I found, if you're looking for new horror movies, we've pretty much figured out if it has A24, it's good. It's high quality. Some are better than others, but that's my recommendation for people out there looking for horror films. Yep. Well, you're on mute. You're muted.
It was wonderful chatting to you. Is there any other URLs that you want to throw out? I have a link to your latest album on Bandcamp in the show notes. I also have a link to where they can where the audience can buy one of your books. But is there anywhere you want to suggest people look at, or what they should get a hold of? Or
I guess the only thing that I didn't mention is that we do have a pig, and we love our pig. His name is Cornelius Cobb. And no, I didn't get our pig so I could dispose of bodies. We just love our pig. We just love our pig. But our pig, Corny Cobb or Cornelius Cobb, has a TikTok channel. He has his own channel, and he is popular. Party, go to TikTok. If you're on TikTok, go find Cornelius Cobb. And yeah, I'm doing pig videos every day. Sorry. All right.
Well, man, I hope you and Laura have a very happy Halloween. And until I get, and it was a great joy having you here, of course, as it always is. And until I get to talk to you again, which hopefully won't be in the too distant future, because we both get very busy with our lives and we don't chat enough. And until I get to talk to everybody else out there, which will be the same weird time, same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, next week, please keep it weird.